Welcome to DU Digimon.
Hello and welcome to DU Digimon and welcome to another deck profile. If you're liking this sort of content, please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel and ding that notification bell so you're not missing out on any of the latest content. Now, if you have not watched the rest of Jank Tank 12, do go and do so. We've got the decks overview video as well as the all of the matches that we managed to film all out on YouTube already. So do go and give those a like and a hype button and a watch and a view and a share and a stop motion image PowerPoint presentation. Make it into a PowerPoint presentation. I challenge someone to make Jank Tank 12 entirely into a PowerPoint presentation. Do it, post it in the Discord. Anyways, this is the winning deck from Jank Tank 12. My deck, AguBond. I finally got a Jank Tank win this year after trying so hard and got so far. But don't know. That's not even the right way the lyrics go. I don't think. Tried so hard and got so far, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. So yeah, no, it's not the right way around. But anyways, yeah, AguBond. We finally got there. Pulsemon got me to second place in the last Jank Tank, but it came up short against Alex's DM list, DM Justimon list. But AguBond, after a lot of trial and error, got me through. I love this list. It's probably my favorite list I've built all year. It's so fun to play. It's really it puts in some work. Like, yes, it does have its quirks. It is still a Jank Tank legal deck for a reason. You know, but saying that, some people did have thoughts with that as I was building it. There were times where they said I'd made it a bit more Greymon Toolboxy. And this is all people in the group, by the way, not people commenting, because none of you guys knew I was doing this list. But you know, there was a point where I was playing the ratio slightly differently, so I had less of the bonds and a little bit more of WarGreymon, and people were saying, oh, it's just Greymon Toolbox. And I can see the argument, because it's, you know, very much uses the Greymon line, but traditionally that is what AguBond does do. It's just it kind of focuses on the lower end of that line, warping up into AguBonds. I merely decided to kind of succinct everything and give us a lot of warping opportunities, and not just right at the end of the game, because that's AguBond's greatest weakness. The fact that you have to let your security get so low just so you can do a check and a trash, and that's it. You know, and if you trash too early and you delete your AguBond, you're getting worse value for yourself. So I decided to make a list which could potentially warp up in the early game, could potentially rush in the early game, while still maintaining that AguBond spirit. Because this does not play like your average Greymon deck. It's very much more focused on the kind of like the resource generation, getting the Tamers out, gaining memory through them. You know, very much more about kind of the rush down and not necessarily keeping your bodies in the early game, and just building more of your board presence so that later on you can just absolutely go for it. You know, it's not a defensive deck. It's not really, you know, it's very much a chip aggro deck. It's not an OTK build by any stretch. It's not that kind of Greymon kind of catered list, but it's very much kind of more going into that warping rush down style, which, you know, is you could argue is still very, you know, is still a Greymon Toolbox thing, but I would argue that it's more of an AguBond thing, and thus I went for it. I just noticed there's a card missing. Why is there a card missing? How is there a card missing? I'll keep that recording a second. Oh, it's Crimson Blaze. Crimson Blaze is missing. There you go. I figured out what was missing. Deck list fixed. But yeah, ultimately, I think this is very much an AguBond list. It plays very differently to your normal Greymon stuff. And I purposely made sure to avoid using stuff from EX10. I don't know how much you could like use the EX10 stuff alongside AguBond. I definitely know that the EX10 MetalGreymon would be good because of the taunting mechanic with it. But I wanted to explicitly avoid that. This was a Tai centered list. I wanted to make kind of, you know, Digimon that Tai specifically has had, You know, so he's never had a virus MetalGreymon before. He's only ever had the vaccine one. He's only ever had SkullGreymon in terms of the viruses. So I wanted to kind of stick with that, and this is what I ended up coming up with, and it really put in the business. It's really fun, and I frigging love it. Let's finally get into the card by cards now, because I have been rambling on for a while. So going into the eggs, we've got the BT9 Koromon at 1, and we've got the BT14 one at 4. I did find that I was churning through my eggs so much that I needed to have 5 eggs, and the reason I went for these 2 is this Koromon is obviously great for the draw. We know how good it is. You know, it can get us draw in the early game with our Greymons. We can swing in with the Agumons if necessary. It will always get us that draw. So that's why I also went for it instead of stuff like BT5 or, you know, anything like that. The reason I went for BT9 Koromon is, unlike a lot of the kind of the Greymon inheritables, this one doesn't. This one specifically says, while this Digimon has Agumon or Greymon in its name, not while this Digimon has Greymon or Omnimon in its name. Because it's got Agumon as part of that text, that includes Bond of Bravery, which means that the deletion threshold of this one will increase. Not for this one, unfortunately, but for this one at least, it will increase, because the higher our DP is, the more we can delete. So it just works really well as a little boost for that, plus also just gives us little boosts here and there. So not bad at all. Next, we've got our rookies. So we've got the BT14 Agumon. Start of main, it pushes out. If you've got a Tai, you digivolve up into Greymon for free. Also gives the 2000 DP inheritable to Greymons or Omnimons, not to Bond, unfortunately. In terms of like 2000 DP inheritables that are generic, I was tempted to play the BT21 Agumon, the one that is from the Medusamon deck, because that one just gives a flat out 2k boost. But this one's so good for the free digivolve, I could not play it. Plus, it does give us boosts elsewhere, which are pretty handy. And then we've got the Agumon from the structure deck, so ST20. This one is a your turn effect. While your opponent has a Digimon with 10,000 DP or more, or your Tamers have 3 or more total colours, this Digimon can digivolve into WarGreymon in the hand for Digivolution cost of 4, ignoring Digivolution requirements, and has a reboot inheritable. And this goes great because if we do manage to get our Tamers set up enough, or if they get a big enough Digimon out, this gives us a way of warping that does not necessarily mean we have to trash our own security. And, you know, obviously, you know, being able to trash our own security is still something you want to be doing, but you don't, you know, the one thing with any deck that's got trashing security kind of trashing your own security kind of mechanics is that you need to have a relevant amount of recovery to go along with that, and AguBond has none because it's not yellow, whereas stuff like Kentaurosmon or Dynasmon has some form of doing a recovery +1. This doesn't have that, so in my mind, I wanted to make it so that we weren't always locked into having to make sure our security was low to do our warping, and instead have other ways of being able to do it as well. So this is our way of doing that, and of course our Tamers kind of reflect that. You know, these guys do share red, obviously, but we needed to run this one, and this one's great. This one's black, this one's white, so all of our Tamers are pretty much different colours. Obviously this one's blue as well. You could also play something like the Tai Kamiya and Kari Kamiya from BT9 to give you like the yellow colour. That's not a bad shout, but this Agumon is fantastic, and I absolutely loved it in this list. And then we've got 3 copies of the Agumon from BT12. Now, annoyingly, he obviously does not search the Agubonds. He does just cycle through, but he does search our Tamers, and we need to make sure we're finding our Tamers so we can get more of our resources. You know, so if we go to the matches, you know, the Tamers were really important with gaining the actual kind of DP necessary, the memory necessary and the draw necessary to kind of really get going, especially in the case of like our BT6 tie, because, you know, that is I think a really underrated card, but we'll get into it later. You know, you could instead play the EX1 Agumon if you wanted something that's going to be a little bit more, you know, it's going to search your Agumon, search your Agubonds, and search your Tamers that way. But the one issue with that is it only does it on swing, which, to be fair, you are doing a lot in the early game. You go up into Greymon and then you swing, and boom, that's your stuff sorted. But I just found this guy was better in that regard, and actually helps us kind of deck cycle a bit. Yeah, it might put our Agubonds to the bottom, which is, you know, unfortunate, but at the very least we've got so much draw power in this deck as well that we could get back to them quite quickly if we need to. So in the early game, very, very good. Then we go to our Greymons. We've got 4 of the EX1 Greymon. This one is in here for no other reason than the combo with Alterous mode, and we'll get into that when we get to Alterous mode. You've got 2 copies of the Greymon from BT21. This is in here as a taunter. So if you have a Tai Kamiya or a Tamer with the adventure trait, give one of your opponent's Digimon start of main phase. This Digimon attacks until their turn ends. And this is in here just essentially to bait them into, it's to kind of force them, if you will, to attack in, and then we can blow out their board with AguBond, which in testing worked a fucking treat. In the actual matches, I fucked up a lot. So, it was it's one of those things. And again, it's got reboot as the inheritable, which you don't really want to double up with the Agumon, but of course the intention with the Agumon is that we're warping off of that one. Most of the time, I end up hard playing this Greymon. So you could make the argument, we'll just play Laplace's Demon or something like that instead. This, of course, can just be played out. It is a Digimon. Laplace's Demon needs a black source. We've not got a whole lot of black sources to go off of, so Greymon it is. But then our best Greymon on the whole lot is the BT17 one, which I still have my lovely SP copy of, that I pulled from my BT17 box way back when that came out. And this Greymon is so good for AguBond. Like, there's no other Greymon list that I think utilizes this Greymon as well as any list involving AguBond. When Digivolving, if this Digimon's name is Koromon, this Digimon gets plus 3000 DP for the turn, then delete one of your opponent's Digimon with as much or less DP as this Digimon. Altered effect, this Digimon gains all the names of level 3 or lower cards in its Digivolution cards, which is really good, not only in this deck, but in some other decks as well, because it can Digivolve on top of things and just gain the name, and then you can just warp off of it and all sorts. So I remember I used to play this in Omnimon, and it'd be called Gabumon, and then I could warp a MetalGreymon on top of it, which was really funny because it's Greymon. And then it's on top of all this as well, you've got the on-deletion effects as well, so you can, if it dies, you can play out a Tai Kamiya or a Kamiya, but it's always going to be a Tai Kamiya in our case, from your hand without paying the cost, or hatch in the breeding area. And that or hatch is very important, because if it's on your turn, I tend to find hatching is more important, whereas if it dies on the opponent's turn, you want to be playing your Tamers. Because obviously you hatch on your opponent's turn, you can't get any advantage off of that, whereas if you hatch on your turn, you hatch in the back, start building up your next stack, off to the races you go, just keeping up that pace of the game. And it has that on deletion both in the inheritable and just as an effect. What is really good as well, because it's got that 3000 DP boost, if we do go into the LM Bond of Bravery, then we're boosting up our deletion potency even more. So this guy will delete something, and then AguBond will warp off of this and just go, boom, over everything. Like that old meme, what was it? Yeah, what the fuck, boom, I think. Yeah. Anyway, so we'll go to the level 5s. We've now got Alterous mode. Now, this was something that probably one of the ones which was the most contentious from the people that kind of said, is it a bit too Greymon Toolboxy, Josh? And I completely get it, because this one is kind of more of a Greymon-centered card. We are, AguBond doesn't warp off of this, AguBond doesn't do that. But again, there was thought behind the madness. So on play, when Digivolve, delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 8000 DP or less. So we're deleting even more stuff as we go. We just want to keep deleting. We've got so much deletion. So if we go BT17, go into this, go into a WarGreymon, go into AguBond, we just keep deleting over and over and over again. And then the combo I mentioned with the EX1, of course, is essentially if you swing in with Greymon, you play out a 3-cost Tai. Of which 2 of our ties are 3 cost. Then, if this one recognizes the tie being played and will digivolve up into a Greymon free of charge. So it will just completely null and void that cost. But the most important reason why I think it's good for AguBond specifically is the inheritable, which is your turn effect. This Digimon gets 4000 DP. Now, if that was an all turns effect and was slightly less, it would be even better, because then you could blast ace with it. But the fact it's 4000 DP, and if you digivolve into Bond of Bravery, you're now deleting 18k's worth of stuff, let alone if you've stacked other things underneath it. So if you've got this plus your Greymon, that's going to be 21k. Koromon 22k. So that is a huge amount of deletion, which not a lot of boards are going to be able to deal with. Is it very realistic that we're necessarily going to climb up in that way all the time? No, because we're mostly going to be warping into AguBond in the late game, or on top of our WarGreymons that go off of the ST20. But it can happen. So I really like it. But yeah, I have been tempted to actually kind of put the numbers down for the Alterous mode in favor of this guy, SkullGreymon. And the reason being is the SkullGreymon is really good for your general kind of rushing style with this, and really helps you with facilitating more of your resource generation in a really kind of roundabout way. So it's got the when digivolving effect. By trashing one card in your hand, delete one of your Digimon with the lowest level and one of your opponent's Digimon with the lowest level. So you do have to be careful with that, because you might not necessarily get your full combo off if this isn't the target for your deletion. So if you have got something lower, you just need to bear that in mind. So bear in mind, you'll delete your Agumon if you've got one on board, and delete their lowest and not this. Whereas a lot of the time you want this one to be the one that takes the hit because of the undeletion effect. So you may play one Agumon from your trash without paying the cost, and then if you have a Tamer with Tai Kamiya in its name, this Digimon gains Rush for the turn. Or that Digimon gains Rush for the turn. And that is really nice because the first part of that effect, when digivolving, if you don't have an Agumon in the trash, you could just put one in there. Then you delete yourself, give that Agumon Rush. If you've got your Tamers out, which I demonstrated actually this in the tournament, then you're then also going to get your Warp live, and you can just swing on in. It's great because you've got the Rush available. It's really good. And on top of that, if you've got the BT17 Greymon underneath you, you've got 2 undeletions going off. Which is really, really cool. So we've got that little undeletion kind of going off where the Greymon will give us a Tamer to play out, and then we can go into our Agumon and then do a bunch of stuff. It's very cool. It's very cool. Then going into our level 6s, we've got 2 copies of the WarGreymon from BT14. I did run this at 3 before, but I bumped it down to 2 so I could have more AguBonds and people could stop telling me this is a Greymon Toolbox deck. Which, technically speaking, it is a Greymon Toolbox deck in the sense that it is a toolbox that uses Greymon. Is it the classic Greymon Toolbox deck, which is a big blocker thing deck? No. So, anyways, this guy, while you have a Tamer with Tai Kamiya in its name and your opponent has a Digimon with 10,000 DP or more, one of your Agumon may Digivolve into this card in your hand for a Digivolution cost of 4, ignoring Digivolution requirements. Then, when Digivolving, this Digimon gains Raid for the turn, and then it may attack. When attacking, if you have a Tamer, this Digimon gains Security Attack +1 and Piercing for the turn, so it is going to help you with kind of just doing more aggressive plays. Then we've got the Promo WarGreymon, so this is the Adventure one. Now, pivotally, and this is something you've got to remember if you do decide to play this deck, this does not Digivolve off of SkullGreymon. This is a target for a warp. SkullGreymon is not usually going to be sticking around long enough to have something Digivolve on top of it. If it does stick around long enough, you could Digivolve into this one. Not this one. This one Digivolves specifically off of something with MetalGreymon in its name or with the Adventure trait. And the only reason I can imagine they did that was not only to really annoy me, but also because of the canon. So this is our Adventure traded WarGreymon. It never Digivolved off a SkullGreymon in the canon. That's probably why they've done that as a cheeky little, oh, look at us, we're so clever, look at that. Meanwhile, I'm here thinking of my card synergy and just thinking, why? But it is a very good card. Otherwise, so it's got Security Attack +1, blocker. When Digivolving, delete one of your opponent's Digimon with as much or less DP as this Digimon, which is seemingly just 12k. However, as an all turns effect, this Digimon gets 1000 DP for each color Digimon and Tamers have. For our board, if we're say going off of just the Tamers, if we've got one of each of our Tamers out, red, blue, black, white, that is a 4k boost. So it will go up to 16k. Then on top of that, boost from here, 18, 17, so potentially more here as well. It's a really good card. It's a very good card. Again, I was tempted to bump this one up as well, but I ultimately decided to stick with it at 2, not only to make this more of a bond deck, to silence the critiquers, but also just as a I guess because of the SkullGreymon thing, really. Yes, it does, because it can come up, but yeah, that's why. Next, we go into the bonds. I'm going to first go into the original bond of Bravery, the BT6 one. When attacking, if you have a Tamer in play, delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 13,000 DP or less. That effect, as you can tell, nowadays, is shit. Because so many Digimon get beyond 13k now, and it's so bad that this is a card designed to delete something specifically smaller than it, which is really stupid. So hence I only play it at 1, and I end up never going into this guy. I always end up going into the ace, which is why originally I didn't play this guy, but then I got pressured into making sure he was in there. And he's just been a brick. He would never. I don't think he came up in the tournament once. But your turn. When an opponent's Digimon is deleted, trash the top card of their security stack. So it is that, and it is at least a backup with our bonds and stuff like that. But the main bond we go off of is the ace, which of course does have the overflow mechanic. So if it dies, gives 5 memory, which is not great, but in every possible regard, it is better than the old one. Obviously, because it's got that counter mechanic, it can also just digivolve off of an Agumon if you've got 2 or fewer security cards for a cost of 3, which means that you don't necessarily have to use this for warping purposes. You can, and in fact, you can do it with essentially, if you do this, you can warp for less security. So if you've trash your 2 security and you've still got 3 left, because this is digivolves off of a level 6 red for a 3 cost. This one lets you ignore the level, so this can then digivolve off of any of your red Agumons, specifically the red ones, so not this, for example. Plus, of course, we've got the general kind of warp mechanics and stuff like that. But anyways, Bond of Bravery, I've kind of mentioned a couple of times already. The more DP this guy has, the more of a board he will delete, because he deletes up to this Digimon's DP total worth of your opponent's Digimon. So the more he's got, the more he's going to delete, which is very cool. He's then got a when attacking effect. If you have a Tamer, trash your opponent's top security card. Nice and simple. It doesn't do the most checks in the world, but it does enough, and ultimately does enough to win the game, because once you've because of the rushdown style we're playing this, if we've chipped them down to 1 security and we go into a bond, we swing, we win, because we've just trashed their last security and swing for game, which is very nice. Then we go to the Tamers. First, we're going to go into probably my favorite of the Tamers we play, because I freaking love it, is the Tai Kamiya from BT6, the OG AguBond Tamer. And it's really just for the simple fact it's got a your turn effect, where when any of your Digimon with Agumon or Greymon in its name moves from the breeding area to the battle area, gain 1 memory and trigger draw 1. So it just gives us this constant draw engine going, and the more we've got out, the more we do it. Yes, I could possibly bump it up to 4, but I also decided not to, just to make our color ratios a little bit stronger, so that we had our Agumon warps and we had more colors, colors for the DP of the WarGreymon. But also this one does let you do a warp up into bond as well. So you digivolve your Agumon into 1 Agumon Bond of Bravery in your hand for its digivolution cost, ignoring the level. And if you do, trash the top 2 cards of your security stack. Then if you have 1 or more security cards, delete that Digimon at the end of the turn. So you do have to be careful with that. If you're going to use this, you need to use it to win the game, is what I would say. Because now you've got the Bond of Bravery Ace, and you can just digivolve off an Agumon for 2 or fewer security anyway. You don't necessarily have to use this all the time, but if you need to use it to specifically win the game, then you can, and I have. Next, we've got the EX9 Tai and Matt, so the adventure one, which obviously typically is more used in kind of gas and Omnimon builds and stuff like that. But I decided to put it in this purely for that extra colour. Yes, we're not going to get 2 memory for this, because it does gain a memory as an all-turns effect when any of your Digimon are played or digivolved. By suspending this Tamer, gain 1 memory if you have a Digimon with Greymon in its name, and 1 Digimon if you've got 1 memory if you've got a Digimon with Garurumon in its name. However, the fact it just gains a memory anyway is, I think, more valuable than something like BT9 Tai and Kari, which, that's just going to make their security smaller. And a lot of time we don't want them to make their security smaller, because A, we don't need them to, and B, we sometimes want our smaller stuff to pass tense, So I really like it in this. Plus, it also gives us a way of getting the Greymon cards out from the trash. So if we want to get our BT17 again, we could get that back from the trash, or we could do a little bit of deck cycling and do a draw 1. Yes, 4 cost for a draw 1 is a lot, but bearing in mind it gives that memory later on, it's not bad. Next, we've got the Tai Kamiya from BT12. Start of your main phase on play. 1 of your Digimon with Agumon or Greymon in its name gets 1000 DP and gains blocker until the end of your opponent's turn. That includes our bond, so that gives us even more ways of being able to do the deletion. And then your turn, when 1 of your Digimon digivolves into a Digimon with Greymon or Omnimon in its name, by suspending this Tamer, gain 1 memory. So we're just gaining a lot of memory all the time. Then we've got the Adventure Tai, so BT21. This is our memory setter, so it sets us to 3. Gives us more draw when we attack in, because if you suspend this Tamer, you get a draw. But also what is quite good about this, and this is another kind of thing why we play the BT21 Greymon, that's an adventure trait. And this guy, if you bottom deck it, which bearing in mind that can also stop us from decking out, which is quite handy, because of the amount of draw power we've got, you may play an adventure or hero trait card with a play cost of 2 or less from your hand without paying the cost. For each of your Tamer colours add 1 to this effect's play cost maximum. So more colours you've got out, the more you've got. And we don't need that many because the maximum we're going to be playing out is 4 cost. So we do that, play it out for 4 cost, bottom deck this, taunt them, job done. Really nice. Then going into the options, we've got 1 copy of Crimson Blaze just to kind of help us with dealing boards early. Like if we haven't got our deletions going, or if we're going up against something that's playing things by effects, quite handy. We've got 1 copy of Red Scramble, which I'd be tempted to bump to 2 and take out Crimson Blaze, but I do like the Crimson Blaze. But Red Scramble is pretty nice. Obviously we know how good scrambles are. They reduce the cost, they help you with putting stuff back into your deck to stop you from decking out, so they're really nice. Also the fact that this has a security effect as well to play out a red Digimon card with 2000 DP or less, play out an Agumon, that potentially gives you a bond target, so that might be an argument for making Red Scramble a little bit more numerous in the deck. Then the last card we've got is Garnet Memory Boost, which I thought was the best memory boost we could have access to, because most of our stuff is either red or black. Only a couple of things are not, so the BT17 Greymon and the SkullGreymon, because they are white and purple, but it adds basically everything else whilst giving us a memory boost. So that is the full deck, guys. I really hope you guys enjoyed Jank Tank 12 and this deck profile. Do make sure to give it a like, give it a subscribe, if you did enjoy the content and want to see more in the future. Ding the notification bell, do the hype button thing, do it. It's kind of fun, I think. Let me know what you guys are hoping for out of the next Jank Tank. We have already done the poll and we have results for that, which I need to actually try and go over. We might even do a do-over as well, because not that many people voted this time around. Only around about 55 people voted. And on top of that, obviously, we kind of had to do it, as a spur of the moment. Right, we've got 1 more Jank Tank to go. Do we wait until the format's developed or do we not? So we might do a do-over of that tier list. We don't know yet. It should be a pretty exciting Jank Tank. I've kind of decided what I'm already going to play already, because I had the card, that in question thrown at me several times. But I'll leave you guys to speculate what that could be, because I haven't cooked with it yet, so I need to figure something out whilst also trying to practice for regionals. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Do stick around for more of this sort of content, and we'll see you again on the next video. But until then, keep it digital.